Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Reinvent Legal Business series. We're absolutely delighted to have you join us today or this evening, depending on where you are in the world. And also, obviously, absolutely delighted to welcome just this amazing panel of people. This series, as you will know, if you've had the opportunity to attend any others of them, is one where we're exploring from a global perspective the new themes that have emerged and those that have changed or expanded, as the case may be, in our new legal ecosystem. We offer these sessions as live webinars, which you're obviously attending today, but we also make them available as part of our Legalpreneurs Sandbox podcast series. So at your option, you can watch and listen or listen only, depending on what's most convenient to you. Today, we're discussing this critically important topic of reinventing the legal workplace. Meet the new people, and you will meet the people in just a second. It's going to be a test at the end of this to see if you can say people, consecutively a number of times. We're going to be exploring a whole bunch of different things. The changing role of human resources and allied critical professional roles to that. The impact of COVID-19 on the workplaces, our work cultures, mindsets, mental health and well-being, capabilities and capability development. And of course, we're going to wrap by looking, as you would expect, at the challenges and priorities that lie ahead. But we're going to talk about a whole bunch more than that in between as well. As I mentioned at the outset, we have a fantastic panel of people here. It is an international panel. We're coming to you today from Australia and the US. And, if you wanted to put a dream team together of folks to talk about this topic, I just want to say they're here. So sit back, relax, and listen, because it is going to be amazing. The panelists are going to introduce themselves because we want you to understand, to place the discussion in context, what they do and who they are and where they come from. So they're going to chat about that to kick off. But I do want to say at this juncture, a huge welcome to Jan Christie, Lou Ferris, Krista Larson, and to you, Sue. Welcome back, Sue Manch. Hello. They're moving.
Hello,
You can see them. So, as I mentioned, I wanted to kick off by getting you to share with everybody, who you are, what you do, and the work that you focus on in the role that you have. And Sue, I wanted to, if I could, get you to kick us off with that question.
Thank you, Terri. Happy to do that. And hello, everyone. So I am Sue Manch. I'm the Chief Talent Officer at Winston & Strawn. We're a firm of about 1,000 lawyers with 16 offices around the world. And we're a general practice law firm with lots of different practice areas. My area encompasses a number of different streams of work. I'm in charge of all things people, as Terri has gotten us to remember. So everything from HR to diversity and inclusion, our recruiting efforts, our performance management efforts, training and development, coaching, well-being, and we also have corporate social responsibility in my department. So it's a broad array, but all people-related functions. My background is that I've been in the legal industry for close to 40 years. I have worked in law schools, law firms, and was a consultant to the legal profession for over 20 years. So I have a deep interest in legal talent and look forward to sharing this topic with this esteemed panel this afternoon.
Thanks so much, Sue. And as you mentioned, coming to us from Washington, D.C., and we'll move up the coast a little bit, Krista, from Boston. How are you? Tell us about you.
Hi, thank you, Terri. And first, actually, let me just say a big thanks for having me today, and to you, Terri, for bringing this awesome group together for this conversation. So I'm Krista Larson, as Terri mentioned, joining you today from Boston, Massachusetts, the States. A little bit about me. I'm the Director of Employee Wellbeing at Morgan Lewis. We are a global law firm of over 4,300 people, about half of whom are lawyers, and our 31 offices in, I believe, 11 different countries. And I have been in this role of Director of Employee Wellbeing for about a year and a half now. And prior to joining the firm, I actually spent my career working in management consulting, and specifically in the areas of leadership and talent development, which meant that I got to help organizations across a variety of industries design and deliver various leadership and talent solutions. And it was during that time that I went back to school and earned my master's degree in positive psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. And for those of you who might not be familiar with the field, positive psychology is a study of the science of well-being. It's looking at the data, the empirical evidence around what makes people and organizations thrive. And so now in this role as Director of Employee Wellbeing, leveraging that positive psychology degree and my experience in program design and delivery, I'm now charged with designing and delivering a custom well-being program for the firm as part of our employee engagement team. So I'll speak a little bit more about this later, but at Morgan Lewis, we see well-being as a component of overall engagement, and we have an employee engagement department charged with fostering that positive connection between the people at our firm and others who work there. So this means I get to spend my day working to enable both our lawyers and our professional staff who work at Morgan Lewis to better thrive in all aspects of life with what we call our MLWell program. So I'll look forward to sharing more about that work with you as the conversation progresses. And thanks so much again for having me.
Absolutely, and thank you, Krista. We'll go for a little swim across the Pacific Ocean now, Lou, and come to you. So tell us about you and where you're from and what you do.
Absolutely. Thank you, Terri. And again, welcome to everyone. And certainly thank you so much for the panelists as well. It's great to be part of this morning. Yes, you're right. I'm situated in sunny Queensland in Australia. I work for a law firm that is certainly deeply entrenched in the Queensland economy. So I'm the Chief People Officer for McCulloch Robertson. We're an independent firm that started about 96 years ago in Queensland, in rural Queensland, and we now sit here with about 400 people, both in Brisbane, Newcastle and Sydney. So our Sydney offices are growing and are certainly challenging some of the brands, the better known brands in the southern states. But up here, my role is, as Sue and Terri and everyone has said, it's all people. It's the head of the human resources function, the L&D function, but also a couple of areas of passion for me include areas mentioned already. So workplace wellbeing certainly is something that has been a passion of mine, certainly across my career in the legal firms. But here, I've got a great platform and a great support, and D&I is certainly another area that I'm proud to say we've had some wins on the board here. My background is law, really. 1990, I think, was the first firm. I've been in 4 law firms, so I come at this with some experience across the different size firms, both local and international firms. So it is great to be here and to share our experiences together with such a diverse group. Thanks, Terri.
Thanks very much, Lou. And Jan, last but certainly not least, tell us about you.
Thanks, Terri, and echoing everybody else's welcomes to everyone. And it is an honour to be part of this panel. Particularly interested when we chatted earlier in the week and then again today to hear from our US colleagues. It's always fascinating to hear what's going on in different parts of the world. I'm one of the capability and development managers at Gilbert and Tobin. I've been here for just on 2 years now. Gilbert and Tobin is probably a bit of a whippersnapper in terms of tenure. The firm is just over 30 years old. It's a really interesting, innovatively focused but fairly big law kind of firm. So we sit in a really interesting space in the market. We have 3 offices in Sydney, Melbourne and Perth. And as we talk through today, I think the fact that we're in 3 very different COVID impacted places really impacts on the way in which we're approaching some of the things we're doing. My background, I also have spent 30 years in law, but I started life as a practicing lawyer, specialised in large-scale construction litigation for many years, and then moved into learning and development, organisational development, and capability and development. So my focus is, rather than the broader HR or people focus, very much around that development piece, with whichever of those words come before it as time has evolved and the role has evolved. So very much looking forward to looking at our discussion today from that sort of people development perspective. Thanks, Terri.
We'll be sure to get it out of you, Jan. Don't worry about that. Look, when I was listening to all of you talk about your roles, which are just fascinating, by the way, I'm just really struck by the depth and breadth of what you spoke about, the responsibilities, if you like, that are under your roles. And I was kind of drifting back to kind of 5 or even 10 years ago, where a lot of the things that you were talking about may not have even been on a radar screen, much less within your responsibilities. So, Lou, I wanted to throw this question to you, first of all, and as you kind of reflect, and I appreciate reflecting is probably in a 6-month time period at the moment, but maybe back a little bit further than that, and maybe even a little bit forward. What sort of big changes have you seen in the role of Chief People Officer or HR director, or whatever the title might be? What kind of things are jumping out in terms of focus or tools or responsibilities in that period of time?
Yeah, no, thank you, Terri. And I guess I come at this from picking up on some of the history. I guess we're a traditional law firm, and traditionally, whilst HR as an area of focus, I think, has certainly got its seat at the table over the last number of years. I think the shift I've seen is really who is leading or guiding for the answers in this current crisis or in the situation we face. And I guess that's the change I've seen, that whilst often it was, let's look at the financials, let's look at the data, what is from a commercial sense, what is the decision, or where's the growth areas, what's the pathway that this firm has to take. What I've seen is that HR has been able to lead, has been able to set the plan. It's had to manage both the safety aspects and the health of people, but also really showcase, I think, our understanding, and it's pretty good, of the economics of the commercial side as well. So that safety and utility has certainly been my mantra through this, and setting the plans and the guidance and providing an idea of the strategy that we need to follow as an organisation. And what I've seen is that I've got an executive leadership team that are fully supportive of that advice. And I guess it hasn't always been that way over the last few years. So that's the change that I've seen. The tools then, I think, is being supported both from the commercial data or the financial data, but also the people data, and how we've tried to manage the both of that information to make the decisions, and really guiding people to say, it's okay, we can move online, this is all right, we can support, and we can do this, and we're not going to fall in a heap. So I think that's the role that we've played, not only setting the ship in which way we'll sail, but also helping them get aboard.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jan, I wanted to throw the question to you, but getting you to put your capabilities hat on, but looking at yourself. So kind of looking in the mirror in a way, and also, as your role as former president of CLEAR, so looking at that from a regional perspective as well. How have we gone on kind of developing those capabilities that Louise was speaking to, around strategy, data, and just the depth and breadth of other responsibilities? How are you seeing that play out from a personal PD perspective?
Yeah, I think there's been a couple of key shifts, and I think they were happening, but they've been absolutely accelerated over the last 6 months. So I think that sense of the requirement of delivering a different set of capability, perspectives and skills, that's been evolving. Leadership skills have been changing. We've been looking at, inclusive leadership, authentic leadership, those kinds of things. There's been a much greater focus on the diversity and inclusion space, the creation of psychological safety, all of those kinds of things. And then the delivery mechanisms around e-learning platforms and virtual platforms. So that's all been, I think, slowly evolving anyway. And certainly we've been doing a lot of work in the capability space for a long time, whatever you've called it, whether you've called it competency or capability or whatever that might be. But I think what's happened is we've come to this crunch where it's suddenly what are these capabilities that are going to get us through a period of crisis, and then beyond that, to ensure we don't lapse back or we don't fall into old habits, and we really do engage with whatever this new workforce and new workplace looks like. And I think one of the things that we've been looking to focus on is, it's not about shifting aside old capabilities and bringing in new ones. It's the emergence and evolution and development of more capability. So we're looking at leadership in a hybrid or remote environment in a way that we've not before. We're looking at the mental health of people working in isolation in a way we haven't before. And I think for me, when it comes back to what am I reflecting on that I'm doing differently, I'm very used to developing programs and curriculums for cohorts. I look at peer groups, I look at their development, I look at, the sorts of things that we want to see from them. I think what I'm looking at now is far more individually focused and looking at each person. So we're looking at, what psychological tools we might be using, what, Gallup Strengths Finder is a tool I absolutely love to work with individuals on. So what are the individual requirements for people? What are their strengths? What can they call on? And I think that's something that's evolving more and more. That cohort work is still important, but that individual capability, and from my perspective, then the individual support and development we can bring, has become really important.
So reflecting on that, and I guess, swimming in a way back across the Pacific Ocean again to the States, how have you seen the role of the people change in the United States over the last short while, or even the last, say, 3 or 5 years?
Well, I think one of the biggest changes that I've seen in the US for these types of positions is that they are finally bringing together the lawyer and the professional staff populations under one umbrella. Mm. We, for many years, had this bizarre siloing of, almost presuming that attorneys needed a different sort of personnel support and training support than did our professional staff. And so thankfully, that archaic way of doing business seems to be going away. And certainly in the roles that I've had in law firms have all been melded between the staff and lawyer side. And I think that trend will continue because it is efficient, number one, but it also makes sure that we're all rowing with the same oars. I think it helps us really stay on message and think about where are we going, and let's recognize the incredible role that professional staff play in making it possible for our lawyers to serve their clients, and the unique experiences and knowledge that they bring to the picture is much more evident when you're looking at talent strategically across the full spectrum of people who work for the firm. So I think that's been very different. I also think what's very different is one of the things that Louise mentioned, which is that we have a seat at the strategic table. I don't think that anyone could have predicted our lives over the last 6 months and our business needs. And I don't think anyone could have imagined how important the people function would be in this particular situation. Everything from imagining the right policies to have in place to protect our people, to worrying about the mental health of our individuals, to figuring out how to manage our staffing levels and make sure that our partners and our associates are being supported while they're remote and trying to learn new skills like doing remote depositions or completely bringing a whole group of lawyers up to speed on all of the things they need to learn about COVID risks to their clients. And all this being done in real time, truthfully, our talent team has, had to flex in so many different directions, but we're essential to finding some of the solutions that we found as we've navigated the last 6 months.
Absolutely. And I wanted to underscore a couple of points that you've made there. And I think that is that almost redefinition of team to deliver legal services and products, it being multidisciplinary. in particular. And you don't want your other specialists, that is lawyers and all of the other professions, seeing coming to a law firm as a career limiting move, right? You want them to have the same opportunities and to thrive. I think that has been huge. And I think also, to go to your point that you were just making as well, Sue and Lou, you focused on this as well. I wonder whether right at the moment, we're in the people's moment, that the human part of this is so critically important, that your roles have always been, but are now perhaps being recognised for what you've always done as being critically important. And on that human bit, Krista, it brings me directly to you. How have you seen the roles changing in HR? And I guess to that extent, actually your role being created, right? Because it's still pretty new in the legal world.
Absolutely. And, you know, I first of all would echo everything Sue, Jan, and Lou have already said. I think that leadership support is critical. I think that being innovative in the approach that you take in terms of the different topics and routes that you're bringing that information to the people is critical. And to what Sue said, I think that for there to be a cultural shift or priority put on well-being, there needs to be that integration of the attorney and staff in what we do. And the thing that I'll add to it as well, and this is where I think Morgan Lewis has been innovative, and one of our big differentiators is where this work is happening within the organization. So I mentioned when I gave my introduction that my role and our ML Well program reside within the employee engagement department at the firm, not human resources. We have Amanda Smith leading our group in her role as Chief Engagement Officer of the firm, which is another new position as far as we know. And so at Morgan Lewis, engagement also includes, you know, some of the other important people-focused functions we've heard about already. We have diversity and inclusion, talent development, community engagement, corporate responsibility, pro bono, and so on, and all coming together. You know, it's all very integrated. We're together focused on what it looks like to create that positive connection between the people who work at the firm, both the lawyers and staff, and the firm and the job that they do. And of course, you know, the employee engagement and human resources departments are complementary in a lot of ways, yet distinct. But we do also regularly collaborate on projects where we have those shared objectives. So, you know, I would say for us, what it looks like where we differ is in the specifics of our skill sets and overall goals. So for example, like where our human resources colleagues have important skill sets related to the technicalities of things like health benefits, in employee engagement, we're working to create that positive sense of connection between the people and the firm, and we see well-being as a really key component of that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Lou, I've got a question here addressed to you, but it's really one that all of you should feel free, please, to jump in and respond to. And I'm going to paraphrase it. Is kind of the jargon that's associated with human resources or talent management, and I guess even having those two terms is part of the jargon, but particularly around things like competencies and capabilities or dynamic capabilities, because all of them have a distinct meaning behind them, and all of you know from you know your own backgrounds that they all are slightly different. Does that make it kind of harder for people to advance and be accepted within the firm? Or I wonder, is it more about placing this position at the strategic role that you've spoken about and allow them to explain their specialism as you would any other specialist in the organisation? So a quick question to you, but I might get you to comment on that one as well, Sue, if I may. So Lou, over to you.
I'll pick that up, but I think I'll pick up on my theme, as I said before, around that specialism that we do bring to the table, and our understanding of, I guess, all the multidisciplines of HR and the talent management piece. I think can, as you say, sometimes get caught up with the jargon and lose people from taking them along. I guess the journey. What this has done though is enabled us, I think, to sit at the table and to bring a level of expertise that is directly relevant to how people are feeling and understanding and coping with this current situation, and come up with solutions. And I think it's also demonstrated significantly our understanding of the business. So if we're able to understand the business and the business side of things and showcase how our expertise can directly link to that continuing and that success and that being able to cope through this through this crisis, I think that's ultimately where the leadership is coming from this function.
Thanks, Lou. And I guess, Sue, everybody's got their jargon, right? Lawyers have their jargon. So do the IT people and the finance people and the business development people, and we can name lots and lots and lots of others. But you know, the fact that they have it doesn't in any way impact, if you like, their credibility or success within the organisation, or it shouldn't. Is it having those discussions at the strategic level that Lou was speaking about that's critical about that part of it?
Well, I do think there's one thing we have to admit is that some of our terms and the things that we are so comfortable with and that define our business do sound a little mushy. So when we come out with our Mindful Mondays and we have our Tapping Tuesdays for using, freedom technique, and then we talk about the talent team, which one of the partners told me sounded like we worked at Disney. I do think that there can be a bit of skepticism about how serious we might be. But yes, I think the reason that we are starting to sound more business-like and sounding as though we understand the business strategy, because all of our clients have these pieces now. All of our clients have chief talent officers and chief diversity officers, and now more of them are having well-being focused positions, and they're all focused on diversity and inclusion. And, so our clients are mirroring the things that we've been talking about. And so suddenly our partners are saying, wait a minute, you guys are the experts on these kinds of things, and our clients are doing them, and we'd like to learn more about that. So, it had to be client driven, because it always has to be driven by the business. But I do think we can be a little guilty of a few mushy terms that don't sound particularly strategic always.
But it's also having that additional business acumen now, isn't it, in terms of your roles, and really, to going to what both of you are saying, connecting the dots between the performance of each individually and collectively to achieving business performance goals, right?
Well, and it's so interesting because, I recently had a partner connect me with a general counsel client of his, and they're trying to develop a new online virtual learning program for their attorneys. And they were consulting with us because they felt as though they'd attended some of our trainings and thought they were really well done and wanted our help. We're also working through one of our D&I contacts at a firm to develop a whole general counsel school for their members of this group. And it's like suddenly they see, oh, wait a minute, these are the kinds of things our talent team can do for our clients. It's all free, obviously. So, the clients love it. And the partners are seeing that, wow, we can deliver this world-class service externally as well as internally.
Yeah.
So I might pick up on that. I mean,
Please.
we've now delivered our first 12-month Tomorrow's GC leadership course to 23 GCs. And the moment one of the GCs emailed me with some referral of work and I was able to forward that on to our litigation department, I think was the win of my career.
But I think it's also, isn't it, the change in, and I want to get into this a little bit more, kind of a change in culture and approach to legal services. So in other words, why wouldn't the business come to you if you're the touch point and then refer it on to the person that's going to deliver that, that those connections are in a whole bunch of different places for a whole bunch of different reasons. So I agree with you. I think it's great that our clients, and in your case, your clients, are seeing your business as being multifaceted and multidisciplinary, and that you'll get it to the right person. I mean, how good is that? You know, I want to get into the mushy a bit, Sue, to use your term, and talk a little bit about mindsets and a little bit about what we've just been talking about. It just seems that in the current environment that we're in at the moment, so much has changed. You know, the focus on people has become, as we have been saying all along, that much more, I guess, laser focused really in terms of our people. And, you know, we haven't had this many people working remotely or flexibly before. We've had to kind of think about business concepts in a different way, you know, whether it's, you know, can people be productive when they're working remotely, or should people who are in a legal support role be allowed to work from home? I mean, all of that stuff is kind of there and in play in a practical sense. But it seems from what you're all saying, that's really expanded into a much broader sense around the opportunity to influence mindset shifts and kind of help with a reset on lots of different points and places. So, Lou, how do you think HR, and through the work that you're doing, or the people through the work that you're doing, is really influencing or helping evolve bigger mindset shifts in leadership styles and skills and change management? And, you know, what are they? What specifically have you seen as examples of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I pick up, I guess, on what you were talking about around maybe some of those support roles, and in March for us, the belief and the absolute truth that was probably existing across a number of roles that from our leaders, that these roles could not be done remotely. What were we going to do? The discussion around safety and utility was very much a case of this group of people, how can they be fully utilised working from home? And I think what we witnessed with the shift, and when you give people the opportunity to find solutions to things from a practical sense, and you lead them through that group of people did amazing. They were able to remain productive, and they still do right through, whether they're working from home or here. And I guess what I saw then, the biggest mindset shift, was that our leaders needed to sit back and trust their teams. They needed to set some expectations and some guidance as to how we were going to work, and often in the early stages of the ISO period, that was coming from us as a blanket. This is what we would be doing. This is the guidance, and how that applied to each of the groups. And leaders needed to communicate and trust, and some of them moved really quickly into that. Others are still coming to terms, to be honest, with being able to trust their people to do the roles, because people certainly through this wanted to be safe and want to be productive. They want to be both, and the majority of people have done an amazing job. So that mindset shift, I think the other thing that's driven it is, if I pick up on Sue's, is the clients. The clients are saying they want to work this way. They want to be working remotely. They don't necessarily want to come into the offices again and connect through that. I mean, certainly our clients are very much wanting to manage work and take the time out to manage family. I think there's some things that have become very important to our leaders over the last 6 months around their family and friends and health and safety. So I've just seen a bit of a shift in what's important to our leaders, and therefore how they approach that with their staff and their understanding of that to get the best out of them.
Thanks, Lou. Sue, I wanted to get your thoughts on that as well. I would say that, and I've said this before and it's worth repeating, that the thing that I hear most consistently around law firms being able to embrace change is people struggling with mindset shifts. And I'm wondering, as we sit here today, and with the thoughts that Lou just shared in mind, are the people in the greatest position to be the greatest influencers and supports of that mindset shift? Because to me, as an industry and an ecosystem, we have to make it. We just have to make it. And so, what are your thoughts on that? And I know it's a hard one to kind of lay on you, but I know you'll come through on that one, Sue. So what are you seeing really, even in that way?
Well, I am seeing the mindset shift that I don't think could have been predicted is happening because of data. And this is what's fascinating to me. It's just as Louise said, and I'm sure was true in Krista and Jan's firms too, especially senior partners would have said, these jobs cannot be done remotely. In particular, let's say our legal administrative assistants, or any number of paralegals, any number of jobs that we designate as not being eligible for remote work in many cases. But the data proved them wrong. We had to go remote. We've spent an amazing amount of time on creating the right kind of technology so we could go remote. And then lo and behold, the secretaries could do their jobs and the paralegals could do their jobs. And you could get associates to help you with research, even if they weren't in the office. All these things that people thought were so important about being in the office, and that people working at home or working remotely would either not work or not be able to use the technology correctly, were wrong. And so, all the things that we have told them over the years didn't shift the mindset, but the data did. The reality of the fact that work went on, they didn't miss anything, bills went out, time was recorded, research was done, briefs were written. The only thing that was holding up work was the fact that courts were closed, and that clients' businesses were often closed. It was not our people not being able to support client work. So, I think we have moved the ball forward 100 paces beyond where it was 6 months ago. And I think that some of the mindset shift that's happened has also made some of those non-believers sit back and kind of say to themselves, what are some of the other things that I believe to be true that are no longer true? So I think we're going to see a big shift. I've seen with our executive committee a willingness to listen to all sorts of ideas about the future, innovations that we could put into place, more agility that we could build into our staffing models and workplace approaches than I think could ever have been under discussion. So I have great hope for this. I think we have turned a corner, but we have to just say it was this unique, weird circumstance where we were all thrown into the same situation, and lo and behold, it worked. And so now we know we can work differently. We know we can accommodate a whole range of people's desires of the way they want to work and where they want to work and how they want to work. Yeah. And I think that we've opened up a whole new world that is going to make us much more able to attract the kind of talent that the consulting firms can attract, and that other businesses can attract, where they've offered flexibility far beyond what a law firm ever offered.
Yeah. It's kind of created an environment of opportunity that is ours to lose, in a way, isn't it? Or ours to embrace. Krista, with the remote working, and Sue's just spoken about that, and we've spoken about it before, and I guess also with the isolation in many respects of folks that comes with that, it seems that we have increased our focus on human connection and communication, and particularly the focus on mental health and well-being. So we're seeing here, for example, in Australia, that being discussed at the moment more than it's ever been discussed before. And I think that's true globally. How do you kind of see, or how is your firm working on that aspect, and I guess under your role, for the improvement of mental health and well-being at your firm, and maybe some of the projects or programs that you started to mention earlier? Would love to hear about now that you're pursuing as well?
Sure. Well, and first off, to state potentially the obvious, but something that I think needs to be at the forefront of all of our minds is that, various emotional and mental health challenges such as anxiety and depression are not unexpected in this situation. And I think that every leader should be leading with that message right now, the message that it's okay not to be okay, right? The stress and uncertainty brought on by the public health crisis is a real concern. And we've taken several meaningful steps towards addressing those concerns here at Morgan Lewis. As you noted, Terri, fostering a sense of connection is key. And at our firm, we have always had a very community-centric culture within and across each of our offices. And it's been a real leading objective since the beginning of the remote work period to extend as much as we can that feeling of community and connection to individuals in their work from home environment. So in addition to, what I think we're seeing in a lot of companies nowadays, things like, promoting the use of video conferencing and video calls in order to encourage high quality connections among colleagues, or even increasing the frequency with which people meet and check in with each other. With ML, we've instated some new connection-oriented initiatives, if you will. So to give an example, we launched our first ever firm-wide STEP challenge back in July, in which around 1,500 of our 4,000 personnel from around the world competed against each other for the highest activity levels. The idea, of course, was to get people moving and connecting with their teams and other colleagues. And it was just incredible how this thing took off. People were sharing pictures and videos of themselves doing their workouts. They were introducing themselves to colleagues from across the globe. There was also, of course, a fair amount of friendly smack talk going on as people were competing for the top prize. But, it was just a tremendous success, something really quite simple, but it was successful in that it got people moving. We got people connecting, and we're, definitely planning to do another similar challenge in the future to keep up with that momentum. But in addition to the more lighthearted things like a movement competition, I also mobilized a substantial effort early on to emphasize the education we had already been doing across the firm around mental health. So we're now, and have for the last few months, been hosting a variety of virtual programs for groups across the firm on different mental health topics, things like stress management and burnout prevention, all, of course, over streaming services. And then also in terms of new programming, I'll mention we now host a firm-wide virtual meditation break twice a week. So everyone at the firm is invited to take a 15-minute pause for a quick mindfulness moment with their colleagues, and turnout to that has been fantastic. I think we might have even converted some attorneys into regular meditators, so big success there. And the final thing I'll say, right before the pandemic started, we had rolled out enhancements to our behavioral health services and benefits, including virtual therapists, psychiatrists, and nutritionist services through a telehealth platform. And especially, of course, now as people around the world engage in social distancing, we are promoting those resources every chance we get, and are really, of course, glad to be able to offer a type of virtual resource like that so people can continue to seek that kind of professional support for behavioral health, even if they can't go in person to a provider. So I could go on, but I won't for the sake of time. But, I think, again, connection is key and critical right now for leaders, to be leading with that message of connection, of it's okay to not be okay, and to be reminding people of the resources that are available to them if they need to seek help.
And I think to underscore, because I know it's something that's important to you and to everyone here today, that it's much, much more than a few broadcast webinars with a whole bunch of surveys coming out, every few weeks. I mean, this is a really comprehensive package of support that highlights the fact that those employees are important, and basically their care is important as well. and I think from what you're outlining, Krista, and I know all of you in your firms have these sort of programs as well. It's very comprehensive. You know, I just want to ask a real quick question, if I may, and that is, and I'm picking up one of the questions that has been posed to us. It seems that in our current environment, particularly the environment using video conferencing and those sorts of collaborative tools, is probably a bit easier if you already know the folks. But do you have to do more or something different when you're effectively almost onboarding folks or bringing folks in that are not well known to everyone? You know, because you can't walk them around the office like you might normally, or arrange a morning tea. So how do you manage that in the current environment? And Krista, I'm asking that question of you, sorry.
Yeah, you know, I think there's a couple of different faces to video conferencing, right? The research tells us that when we have this nonverbal connection with somebody, whether we're in person or over video, the work that we're doing together gets done more effectively and more efficiently, right? We're able to pick up on more cues, things are better able to be understood right away, and we see the quality of the work improve. But I think the flip side is we have to remember that it's also vulnerable to be on camera from home. And in the example you mentioned, Terri, of meeting new colleagues, right? We're on video conference and we're literally inviting people into our home. So I think we need to be mindful of the expectations that we set around video conferencing, but keep in mind that if there is that culture around the connection and around wanting to get to know you as a person and maybe ask about the artwork that's hanging in your workspace or the family photo on the bookshelf behind you, you know, there are ways to leverage that, bringing people into your home to make sure that we're finding ways to increase that connection and have it be a positive experience. So I always, you know, put out there, video conferencing is great, but let's also keep in mind some of the vulnerabilities that might come along with it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, I want to pick up on some of the things that you mentioned earlier around capabilities, and I guess, you know, firstly the changes in how we're developing those capabilities, which you touched on, but also the capabilities themselves. But in that question, I wanted to put to you a question that we've also received from the folks that are participating, and that is particularly in relation to the early career professionals or junior lawyers. I know it's one close to all of your hearts. And the question is around this, and again, I'm paraphrasing. You do a bunch of stuff with them if they were in person, and there's an aspect of collaboration and learning that comes when you're physically present with someone. But we're in a situation now where looking at the onboarding bit slightly differently, particularly for the junior folks, where they have to still bridge quite a significant knowledge gap, but they're not going to be in the office. So how are we using all the stuff that falls in your world to develop those capabilities, particularly for that group initially, if you wouldn't mind addressing that, and then perhaps more broadly?
Yeah, this is something we've been looking at really closely, obviously, because in this period of time, we've had a graduate group commence pretty much just as we all went into lockdown. They started at the end of February and then all went home. In Victoria, we've had our winter clerk group, so who did their clerkship entirely virtually. So there's been a lot of focus on that kind of thing. And we've really looked at it from two perspectives. And it's been the perspective of the junior lawyer themselves, but also the perspective of the people who are meant to be supporting them, delegating to them, working with them. And so what we've done is rolled out a series of sessions, and this is where we see our role in developing that capability set as being really important. Where in the past it would have been, let's talk about delegation skills. Now, under that broader heading, it's let's talk about your role in nurturing the development of a junior lawyer. Part of that's delegation, but it's so much bigger than that these days. These are the things you should be talking to them about. These are the questions you should be asking. You've got a number of platforms available to you. Yes, there's the video conferencing and that kind of thing, but there's Jabber, there's instant messaging, there's email, there's phone. Talk about what works best for you and for them. Engage in a way that works for people. Jabber is an incredibly easy way to just check in and say, how you going, anything you need, that kind of thing. But we've also been doing a lot of work with the juniors to encourage them to actually reach out and ask those questions and put their hands up and sort of say, I want help. I want to have a discussion. I need to talk to you about these things in an environment where it's safe for them to do so. So it's also working out what are the cues where it's, one of the issues with being remote is you don't know if someone's too busy to talk to you. So how do you create the cues that say that's okay? Is it a green light on Jabber? Do you set specific times? You've got to be, to come back to some of the things we were talking about, mindset, you've got to be far more mindful about it. You've got to be sitting into a growth mindset around how you do these things. And that's from both perspectives. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into that. I do think they're missing out on a lot of that incidental contact and those just overhearing the discussions. And that's, one of the beauties of open plan in an office like this is they get to work with incredibly smart people doing really big deals. And it's that incidental hearing that they're missing out on. So the other thing we're trying to encourage people, the more senior people, to do is to be really mindful about, how do I do things? When I go into this conversation, let me actually get really literal about how I do that. What are the steps I take? The things that I do unconsciously, let me unwrap that and talk you through it. So it has to be a far more conscious thing. And I think in that case, it's a far more conscious calling out of the capability you're talking about. So you're actually giving it a name. This is where I go into my strategic thinking mode. This is where I really look at the core elements of the deal, and I break it up these ways. And I think it's a much more deliberate interaction, but it has to come from both sides. I think we have to encourage the juniors to really put their hands up about it as well. And that's a lot of the work we're doing at the moment. So that's sort of that specific junior question. So the broader question, I think, around, what are those broader capabilities that we're looking at? As I said, I think one of the really interesting things is we're starting to overlay new capabilities over the top of others. So when we're talking about leadership in that space, you're talking about people who've often never had to lead a remote team, or even though we have 3 offices, there was always another partner in the other office who looked after the people who were on the ground in the other office. But now, all of our offices are in a slightly different environment now, but just that notion of the skill set required and the change in thought process. And I think, to come back to the people part of it all, you actually have to think about the people. You have to think about the situation that they're in. You have to think about the right time to talk to them. You need to think about what their personal circumstances might be in a way you never have before. Those are new capabilities or evolved capabilities that we need to focus on. So I think that's really interesting. Yes, there's all the technical ones. Yeah. We have to teach people how to use about 15 different virtual platforms. But it's really what sits behind that. Once I'm on the platform, how am I going to engage? What am I engaging in that's really important?
And I guess fundamental in all of that, Jan, too, those capabilities or a new focus on things like creativity and innovation and curiosity to kind of engage in all of that stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think curiosity is a really good one. And I think that's one of the ones where, particularly one of the things we talk to the juniors about, if you find yourself sitting there going, I wonder how to do this, or I wonder if there's another way of doing this, what better time to raise I wonder if there's a better way than a time when nobody quite knows what they're doing with anything anyway. That's Throw it into the mix. We have an entire arm of this firm that's about innovation. Give it to GT Innovate, let them play with it, do that kind of stuff. And so I think there's that opportunity to contribute in a way that might not have been available quite so openly before. So I think there's also an element of safety in being remote and trying things. and I think curiosity is a good way of describing that. So it's not as confrontational as saying you're expected to come up with something new, but it's just that let's explore and let's wonder a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Folks, we've got a few minutes left. You know, time goes quickly when you're having a good time, and this has been amazing. So I wanted to flip to be kind of forward looking in a way, and for people to focus on those things that might be challenges or perhaps priorities that lie ahead. And I think we've touched on a few of them. It seems like, you know, data and data analytics is definitely something that we want to be focusing on, really developing in parallel skill sets with leaders and managers and the folks that they will be working with, that multidisciplinary environment and opportunities for everyone at work. But there's one that we haven't touched on, and it picks up one of the questions here in particular. And Sue, I'm going to address this question to you on diversity and inclusion. The question relates specifically to gender diversity, and that is that the ways that we are working now, would you see those potentially as being a benefit for women lawyers and women professionals who may not have otherwise returned to work in the office, but now have the opportunity to return to work from home? And is there also a broader diversity and inclusion issue that we need to be focusing on as we look ahead?
Well, I think it's a tough question. And I think that the whole idea of remote working for parents in general, not just women, is a double-edged sword. It's lovely to be able to have more time with your family and to not have a commute eat up all that time so that you can actually have meals with your kids and spend time with them. But unfortunately, we've now become homeschoolers. And essentially, we're in a situation where every jurisdiction is slightly different. And it sounds as though Australia is just as regionalized as the US, that some schools are open, some are not open. When your school is not open, you know, unless you choose to bring a nanny or other caregiver into your bubble, you've got working parents who have to deal with trying to figure out how to manage a school day, and the younger the child, the more difficult it is. So I worry that women in particular will suffer, because we know that women often shoulder a disproportionate burden of childcare. I worry already that our women are stressed about what they should do, about whether they should reduce schedule, you know, get other people to help them. You know, people are really having serious questions about their careers and about what they're going to do. I think from a racial perspective, I worry that some of our racial minorities are not going to be as visible. They're not going to reach out when they need work because they don't want to be perceived as not having work or needing more help. They may not ask all the questions that they need. They may be more reticent. As you say, it's impossible to know if a partner is busy. You know, it's much more difficult, at least. I can't look in your window of your door and see if you're there or not. So I may be more reticent because I'm more worried that you will look at it as an intrusion. So I do worry about an impact that is an unintended consequence of this remote work environment, in which our minority associates, particularly the newer, more junior ones, will become less engaged in the life of the firm. I've seen a really troubling trend over the last few months in, you know, watching associates in particular not sharing their videos. And it's interesting to me that in the beginning, everybody shared video. It didn't matter if you had your COVID beard or your, you know, t-shirt and your cat climbing over your shoulder. And then by the time we got to July, the weariness with being on camera all the time, I think, took a toll on people. And I think it also shows a socioeconomic divide, because you see people who are living in homes with lots of people and they can't have a quiet spot to be able to constantly broadcast 50 Zoom calls a day. Or they may be, they may not have, a nice backdrop that they feel comfortable showing. They may be living in a tiny little apartment in which there's no space. So I think there's a lot of things that, have to do with humanity, if you will, that are going to have potentially difficult consequences for women, minorities, and in general for people who are going to be who struggle more with this whole pandemic. There are people who just are debilitated by this, the fear and the anxiety and the amount of change that's been thrust upon them. And I worry.
Yeah, absolutely. But having said that, there couldn't be a better group of people in your respective firms to go to have those issues discussed and resolved. And sadly, we have come to the end of our time. I could have easily have gone for another hour to chat with all of you about these things. But I know if folks have questions for you, they can find you on LinkedIn. And I also know you're all very open to that approach and to support and assist the people in moving their agendas forward. We have a bunch of other events coming up in this series, so please do follow the Centre for Legal Innovation on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook to find those opportunities. And as I say, sadly, we do have to end, but not without a huge amount of thanks and appreciation from us for your contribution, Lou, Jan, Sue, and Krista. It's just been an absolute delight to be with you here today, and I can't wait for the next opportunity to be able to work with all of you. So thank you very much. To those of you that attended, really delighted to have you here as well, and we look forward to welcoming you back as well to another event. Thank you very much, folks, and see you next time.